Hi there, I'm Maggie Langrick and I'm the publisher at LifeTree Media. We are a hybrid publishing company specializing in books that help, heal, and inspire. And I think that one of the things that I appreciate and really love most about the work that we do is that we get to spend time every day with really smart, values-driven individuals who want to make the world a better place by sharing some kind of experience or knowledge that they have and they hold. And we are lucky to have with us today one of our authors, Claire Booth, who is the author of The Achiever Fever Cure. Claire is going to tell us all about what it was really like to write and publish her first book. So Claire, thank you so much for coming down and spending time with me here today. So let's just to put it in context for the people viewing, tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to write The Achiever Fever Cure.
Sure. So I am founder and CEO of Lux Insights, which is a market research firm based here in Vancouver, and we have an office in Seattle. And I've been doing market research, talking to consumers about what makes them tick, what they love, hate, what delights them, who they are. I've been doing that for 20 years. And about 5 years ago, I realized that while I've spent all this time understanding how consumers tick, I started to understand that I didn't know how I ticked. And so I hit a point where I was so overcome with the anxiety and the go of running my own business that it was getting in the way of my confidence as a leader. And I knew that something had to change. And it's something that isn't just a me thing, it's prevalent in our society, particularly among other achievers and entrepreneurs and professionals, this driven go mindset that can get in our way of being our best selves.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about what that is to you.
Right, so there's nothing wrong with achieving. There's absolutely nothing wrong with achieving. I think that goals are great, intentions are better, but achiever fever is the dark side of achieving. Achiever fever is when we start to tie our accomplishments and our self-worth to our accomplishments. And we start thinking that if we achieve this thing, we'll finally be able to, have all these things that we've dreamed of. We'll finally be happy and satisfied and fulfilled, only to find that we do achieve whatever it is that we wanted and realize, okay, I have to do this all over again. But this time I have to do it bigger, better, faster, more, and we get ourselves on this vicious treadmill and develop this very diluted way of looking at the world, similar to being in a fever. And it's a mindset that settles on a lot of entrepreneurs and professionals so that we keep ourselves on this treadmill of striving.
Yeah, because we're always on that hockey stick of growth, right? We're always trying to go up and to the right, right?
Right, because if we're not going up, we're going this way.
And you were achieving. Your business was thriving at the point when you had your kind of like realization or a big turnaround. It wasn't that you were, being held back in your life. You were moving forward, but it didn't feel satisfying, or it wasn't bringing you joy.
Well, we were pulling in the clients, we were growing at 20% each year, I was bringing in the employees, like everything spoke to success. I should have been at a point in my life where I was fulfilled and happy, given that I had reached all the goals that I set for myself, but I found myself each day waking up in this miserable sort of like, gotta keep getting out there and I'm not trying hard enough.
So tell us a little bit about how did you turn it around? How did you first of all come to realize that this was what was causing your dissatisfaction and unhappiness, was not that you weren't getting what you wanted out of life, but that it wasn't sticking, it wasn't landing and bringing you contentment. How did you come to realize that, and what did you do to shift it?
Well, I thought that I was hiding a lot of this from my employees. I thought, all the insomnia and getting a couple of hours of sleep at night and the depression and the anxiety, I thought I was keeping it all under wraps until one day we do an annual review of all the senior leaders, and I was reading through the comments. They were all anonymous. And one of the comments was, I know what kind of day it's going to be as soon as Claire walks in the front door. And to me, that was my wake-up call. It showed me that my mask was slipping, and I knew that if I didn't make some serious changes, that I was going to be a liability to my own company. And I was sick of being miserable. And so when you're ready, the teacher will appear. And there was somebody in my life, my climbing coach, I'm a rock climber, and he's a triple black belt in martial arts, and he has a very spiritual side, and he took me through a transformation program that completely changed the person that I am.
Oh, so we could sit here all day and talk about what the step-by-step looked like. It's fascinating, and if you have an opportunity, you should really pick this book up. Claire really shares her journey and all of the, the milestones along the way and the difference that it has made. Tell me. Let's fast forward to the where you are now.
Right.
How did this help you?
Right.
This
So
process?
five years ago, I would go into the office each day and I would go on QuickBooks, our accounting software, and I would go line by line looking at all of the different financial aspects and thinking about.
I can relate to that as a business owner. Absolutely. Yeah.
Where do I put more in? Where do I pull more out? I was such a micromanager around all that stuff.
Yeah.
And just being intensely involved in the project work as well as trying to run the business. And so 5 years later, now that I've got rid of that self-doubt and that worry and that fear and that need to control, now that I recognize we really can't control anything, now that I've developed much more of a growth mindset and I've slowed down, what's ended up happening is I've delegated the running of my company to my president, so that I've got one foot out the door ready to do whatever it is that comes next in my world. And 5 years ago, had you asked me what comes next, I would have had an answer for you. And now I don't. I don't know what comes next for me, and I love it. I love it.
That scares me.
I love not knowing.
I'm not yet where you are now. But obviously, one of the things that came next for you, and this is what I really want to talk to you about today, is the writing of the book and the embarking on this journey as an author. So obviously being an entrepreneur is a hair-raising experience. It takes a ton of courage. How does that stack up against the courage that it took to write a book about it? Well, first of all, how and when did you decide that that was something that you even wanted to do, that you were going to actually, oh my goodness, I'm going to put this in a book and share this with the world?
Yeah.
Tell me about that, what that was like.
So I've been a journal writer most of my life. And so the whole time that I was learning all of this stuff with this coach and all these retreats that I was going on and the books that I was reading and learning to meditate and learning so much more about myself, I was journaling the whole time as well. And I remember at one point, a couple of years in, I was telling my coach about this, that I'd been writing it all down, and he said something like, yeah, for the book that you're gonna write. And it wasn't like a what? What do you mean I'm gonna write a book? He said it, and it was just like, yeah, for the book I am gonna write. It was just
really?
like an instant intuitive, like, yes, that's gonna happen. And so it was, a bit of a roller coaster to actually signing the contract and saying, yes, I'm going to do this. And then once I did do that, it was about a 2-year process of, what led to this. And talking about courage, I got to see up close what courage within my world, no external validation within my world, what that looks like. And to me, writing is a battle cry against self-doubt. I'd sit down and I would think to myself, who am I to think that somebody's gonna read this? Who am I to think that I've got something to say? And
how did you answer yourself in those moments when that question of self-doubt was cropping up? How did you dig deeper or move past it?
I just did it because I knew that I had a book to produce by, X amount of time. I wanted to get it out there. And so just the acting was enough to get me through that self-doubt spot, because what would often happen is I'm writing and sometimes stuff would just come out of my fingertips and I'd think, I had no idea I knew that. And it was such a rush. There was so much adrenaline and emotion and catharsis that came out of writing. It just continued to propel me along. It was such a transformational experience that I just didn't think to expect. I thought it would be much more of a practical, nuts and bolts type thing. But it was a huge practice in self-awareness.
So it sounds like, I think of writing a book as something like the process as well. I've got these ideas in my head, and now I'm going to put them down on paper. But it sounds as though it was that for you, but also there's this kind of totally creative, generative aspect of it, where you were actually just discovering and putting together your thoughts as you were going along too, and finding new connections.
It was very much an insights generating exercise and a rush of discovery when I least expected it. I'd think, okay, I've got a couple hours, I got to get through this section, and I'd be halfway through and I'd write something down, and all of a sudden there'd be tears coming down my face. And I'd think, oh my goodness, I had no idea that was behind, X, Y, and Z. And so while I had the basic premise for the book, in some ways it wrote itself, and in other ways, when I thought I was going to go this way, my thought process took me this way, and so it was a bit of this as well.
So you just had to surrender to the process, and you started to trust it.
Yeah.
So did you ever, were there moments when it really wasn't flowing? Did you have, the dreaded writer's block? Or, and if so, how did you grapple with that?
Right, so the way that I constructed my timing around writing this book was I said to my team, because I have 15 people that report to me, right? So I said, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm going to be at home and I'm going to be writing. And in my mind, I said, I'm going to start at 8:30 and I'm going to quit at 12:30. I'm going to put 4 hours in. I'm going to write X number of words. So 8:30 came around and I'd be stacking the dishwasher, and then it'd be 9 o'clock and I'd be doing the laundry, and then it'd be 9:30, and then, I better just get back to this person on email. And so my writing actually ended up being from about 10 to 12. And that just seemed to be the perfect amount of space for me. It was like 2 hours, a couple of days a week, a little bit on the weekends. But sometimes it was pulling teeth. It was absolutely pulling teeth. Sometimes I'd write 4 lines. Though I remember there was one session where I wrote for 8 hours. I didn't get up from my desk for 8 hours. And I finished that 8 hours and I thought, I haven't even been to the bathroom. Like, how is this humanly possible? How did this, it was just, I was so deep in the flow. And there's, for me, nothing more enjoyable than being so deeply in the flow of the task that you forget that life even exists in who you are. I mean, nothing else has brought me that besides writing.
So it sounds like you set out with a kind of a plan for a writing practice, but then you also had some flexibility around that.
I did.
So you had your 4-hour block, then it became a 2-hour block, but sometimes if it wanted to be, it could grow into an 8-hour block.
It could be, right. Yeah. And then often as I started to get closer to deadlines, and thank goodness I had those deadlines. So I had to submit a chapter a month. And quite often, we were getting closer to the end of the month, and so that weekend was going to be a writing weekend, whether I liked it or not. Because as an entrepreneur, accountability is so important to me, and that's part of the reason that I chose LifeTree, because they were so good at holding me accountable in such a supportive and encouraging way that I didn't want to let anyone down. I'm naturally a people pleaser, and I love my editor so much. And so when she said, I'm expecting to see a chapter, well, I'm certainly going to deliver her a chapter.
So tell me about the editorial relationship from your perspective.
So my editor lived in Toronto and I'm in Vancouver, so I didn't actually meet her face to face. But I developed what I now look back on as a bit of a long-term, like a long-distance relationship. Like, I was in a relationship with this woman because I was pouring out my soul, and she would read my chapter, and then we'd have this monthly phone call, and we'd go back and forth on what I'd written. But what I really loved about it was she said, you don't have to do any editing at this point. Just give me a chapter, we'll talk about it, then move on to the next one, and then move on to the next one. And that really, really suited me because I was able to stay in that creative process as opposed to going back and editing and then editing. We developed such a synergistic relationship that when I did meet her just a couple of months ago in person, I just gave her the biggest hug I've given anyone. I just felt like she deeply, deeply knows me. I was deeply connected to her.
Do you think that you would have been able to write it alone without that kind of editorial support?
No. I don't know that it would have been that I'd give up, but I certainly would have extended my timeline considerably. Yeah, I would have thought like, I didn't get it done this month, but I'll get it done next month. And then it just would have been a bit of a drag in my life. And being able to work with an editor and have these timelines, it made something that could have been a real slog into something that was such a energy providing thing.
That's wonderful to hear. And what about the shaping of the book? We often hear about, sort of tension between authors and editors, or different sort of visions for the work, or even just for a chapter, or even for, the title.
Yeah.
How did the input from your editorial team shape the work as you conceived it in your own mind? And was that ever a kind of like a challenging balancing act?
So one of my most vivid memories was I had submitted the whole draft, and we'd been interacting once a month, but the whole draft went in, and I got it back a month later with 14 single-space typed pages of notes, 14 pages. And the first page was all very, nice, feel-good type stuff.
She's good at that.
And then I turned it over to page 2, and it was just like, oh my God. And I remember thinking, there is so much work left to be done. How will I ever? And if I go back and read that memo now, it's not like I had to rewrite the book by any stretch. It was like, move this here, flesh this out, dump this, that sort of stuff. But at the time, I remember seeing this 14-page memo and thinking, like deer in headlights. Like I was so, but of all those 14 pages of suggestions, I took every single one of them. There wasn't one thing that she suggested that I didn't factor into the book. Like all of her suggestions were so useful, so helpful. They made the book such a better book. They made it flow so much better. And she gave me some really good insights about stuff that she was seeing in my writing that I wasn't able to see in my own writing. And
can you give me an example?
Yeah. So, for example, there was a whole chapter on growth mindset. And I didn't see what a growth mindset I was developing in just writing the book in and of itself. Here I am writing about growth mindset and writing about resilience and not realizing that the act of writing requires a growth mindset and it is developing my resilience.
Interesting.
And so I was able to pull some of that into the book as well.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, it's a beautiful book, and now you've been on the road with it. It came out the beginning part of this year, so it's been in the market for about 5 months, and you have been on the circuit, Claire. I mean, like you said just before we started filming, somebody that you spoke to recently said, "Oh, you're everywhere these days." So tell me what it has been like. Now you're a published author, and you're doing media appearances, and you're speaking. Tell me how your life has changed, both around the time of the launch and also, I suppose, in a more enduring kind of a way.
Right. So it was such a whirlwind at the beginning to be on live television, because most of what I did was live, and I'm on national TV, and all of a sudden there's like lights in my faces and an audience, and so it was very surreal. But what I enjoyed most about it was that the book is about my life. So I knew that any question that came my way, there was no way for me to feel like an imposter because I'm writing about my life. So I really enjoyed those questions. I really enjoyed seeing, like, I had this sort of like, what are they gonna throw at me today? Like, it was like juicy type stuff. And each interview that I did, I learned more and more about myself, learned more about what I'd actually written, and just enjoyed the process so much. And tried to document as best I could on social media, which was totally new for me. And so that was a learning curve as well, and one that I'm still very much learning. But it was fun. It was a blast. And now I'm starting to speak to corporate audiences and adjusting my message for different audiences, and that's been really fun too.
So you mentioned that you're doing more speaking. And tell me about that. Was that always part of the plan? Is this something that was unexpected, or tell me where public speaking fits in.
It was when I first started to write the book, the idea about having something to speak on was what was really appealing to me, because I do like speaking. I've spoken throughout my career, and the thought of having to have a book to actually speak on was so appealing. I didn't expect to actually enjoy the writing process as much as I did. So that sometimes now when I'm speaking, I find that I'm missing the writing process. And the social media writing doesn't quite cut it. I'm already thinking about, I need to be starting on my next book. Not even like I need, like I'm craving that desire to start generating again. But the speaking is really interesting because I'm sharing, the message and my most authentic, vulnerable self with, rooms full of CEOs. And what I'm writing about is things like, self-doubt and vulnerability. And I'm telling my own very personal stories to, hundreds and hundreds of strangers. But I love it because there's always a few people that come up to me at the end and say, that's how I feel. That's my day-to-day life, what you're talking about and what you're writing about. And then they thank me, and that connection that I feel, that really true connection that I feel, that's what I feel is driving me forward now. It's not success, it's that who can I connect with and how, and can I bring this to somebody in order to foster a connection?
A real authentic moment, yeah. So is this a career shift for you?
This is definitely a career shift for me, yeah. Now that my president is running my company, my next step will be something that, maybe it's not this particular book, maybe it's the next book, but there's something about being an author and speaking that really, it brings me to life. I love it. I love the freshness that I wake up with every day and think, like, what am I going to say today and who am I going to meet today? And I never really know what's coming next. And running a business, I usually knew what was coming next. And so this is just a very different stage of my life.
So I want to ask you a question about your publishing decisions, your strategy, because of course we know now that there are lots of different ways to publish. You can self-publish, you can shop it around to a traditional publisher, or you can work with a hybrid publisher, and you chose to work with a hybrid publisher. Tell me about your decision-making process and what that was like for you, what you felt you gained from that approach over the others. Right,
so I knew that I didn't want to go the self-publishing route.
And why?
Because I had met people that had done that. And I'd heard the term vanity press, and I wanted to make sure that whatever it was that I put out there was professionally edited. That was really important to me. And I knew that if I went the self-publishing route, I could find an editor somewhere, but it just seemed like a lot of work, and I knew that I would have to hold myself accountable. And that was, you know, I had so much going on with my business. I needed somebody else in there to hold me accountable. Going the traditional publisher route, because I haven't written a book before, I honestly was a bit too intimidated. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know who to talk to. You know, you can't just call up Simon & Schuster and say, hi, I'm such and such. This is my book idea. What do you think? Like, I knew. I knew that wasn't a route that I was prepared to go down. And then, of course, somebody introduced me to you. You know, the way that things tend to happen, I was at a cocktail party talking about this idea of wanting to write the book, and she said, you need to talk to my friend Maggie, and you and I had coffee, and you read me. You knew I was an achiever. You looked me right in the eyes, and you said, so are we going to do this or what?
And I could see it. I could see it. You were serious. You were all about it, and it was going to get done. And I knew that I wanted for us to be part of it. So.
Yeah. And that was a very memorable moment, was that time in the coffee shop where you said, are we going to do this? And I knew if I didn't say yes, I would drag my feet. Months would go by. So it was like a do or die moment. And I did. And, you know, life changes. Yeah.
So tell me, just before we sign off then, how do you feel that this experience has changed your perception of yourself or your idea of your life course?
That's a good question.
I stumped her.
I feel like it's changed so much and will continue to change. So, you know, I'm on a different course than I was a few years ago. And I know that the act of writing is something that is so important to me that I can't not do it. So that's always going to be a part of my life in whatever shape or form that takes. And ideally, it will be another book. I don't know what the idea is for that book. I have a few little kind of things
We've talked about a few little things.
Yeah, but I enjoyed the process so much, I can't imagine not doing it again. So that is part of my future. And then just, you know, the expansion, the mind expanding space that writing gives me. I just want more of that. I want to live a life where my mind can just keep expanding and expanding and expanding, and writing helps that happen.
Incredible. Well, you're such an inspiration, Claire. I remember the first time that we met, and you know, this was just a vision that you had and still seemed like such a long way off. And here we are, the final thing, and you are just stepping into this role as author so beautifully. So thank you so very much for coming and joining me and just opening up about the experience.
Oh, thank you, Maggie.
Thanks for watching.